nonprofit advocacy group for the St. Johns River.
And our mission is to help protect the river.
Hello, welcome once again to the St. Johns Riverkeeper Show. I'm Jimmy Orth. I'm the Executive Director of St. Johns Riverkeeper, and I'm here today with my co-host and your St. Johns Riverkeeper, Lisa Reineman.
Hello. Hello, it's good to be here once again.
Yeah, and we're going to sit here today, and obviously this will come as a surprise. We're going to talk about the river, because that's what we do and that's what we like to talk about. But before we do that, Lisa, will you tell everyone out there a little bit about St. Johns Riverkeeper, that there's folks out there who may not know who we are and what we do?
Sure, I'll be happy to. We are a 501c3 organization, totally membership based. So all of our support comes from our members, as well as our financial support, our volunteer support, and that allows us to keep regulatory agencies accountable and make sure that we can focus on the big issues and take tough stances when we need to. We also focus on education and outreach and getting folks to celebrate their river, to get out on the river whenever we can, and also to understand what the challenges and threats are to the river.
Absolutely. Well, and well said, and I think also just to make sure people know that they can join on our website.
Most
if you go
definitely.
to our website, which is, I don't know if we're going to have it up on the screen today or not, but you can see it right here at the back on our board back here. Go to our website. We have lots of information about St. Johns Riverkeeper, what we do, and also, obviously, if you like what you see, you can join and become a member. We are 100% privately funded, so you are the folks that keep this going and allow us to be, what we like to say, an independent voice for the St. Johns River. Lisa, one of her roles is to be at those meetings where decisions are being made that impact the future of the river. We're there to represent the river's interest, but also your interest to make sure that the river is protected. And we also, as you mentioned, education programs. We do a lot of boat trips. We actually just got off of a 2-day eco-heritage boat trip that we do a couple times a year. That was fabulous. We do 2-hour boat trips that we try to offer once a month. You can learn about those online. We also offer a lot of educational resources. I just had a request this morning from a teacher in St. Johns County. They want to show all the kids in their school one of our documentaries that we produced. So we have documentaries. We have a guidebook to the St. Johns River that we've developed also. You can learn all about that on our website. Also, you can learn about some of the issues, and we're going to start talking about some of those today. One of the issues that's been a real hot button issue here in Northeast Florida involves Georgia Pacific and a proposed pipeline. Lisa, you want to give a little background about that? I know we've talked about it on the show, but there's folks out there that may not be familiar with this issue. We can give them a little background and then give an update about where we are.
Be happy to. Georgia Pacific is a paper mill, and they've been in operation just north of Palatka since 1947. So it's long history, job provider in Palatka, obviously have serious roots in that community, but they've also had a serious impact on the St. Johns River. Historically, some of their processes have produced more problems for the river, and actually their discharge to date has been into Rice Creek, which is a small tributary to the St. Johns. And there's been water quality issues that they have been striving to meet for years. Unfortunately, have not been able to meet. And back in 2002, as a result of a challenge, there was a judge's order requiring Georgia Pacific to build a $50 million pipeline to the St. Johns River, because you have a larger mixing zone that gives them a better opportunity to meet water quality standards. And that's a real concern for us. You know, it's hard to see a pipeline going out to the river just for dilution's sake. We don't believe that that's the answer to pollution, but unfortunately that pipeline is under construction as we speak.
And as you mentioned, that was in 2002. The judge outlined a list of things that they needed to do to improve their effluent.
Right.
If they couldn't do it, if they were unsuccessful in meeting all the water quality standards in Rice Creek, then they had to build the pipeline, and I believe that order said by October 2012 they have to be using that pipeline.
That is correct. The clock is ticking. It's October 2012, which obviously is a couple months away. The St. Johns Riverkeeper, we've been diligently pipeline. We have been really focusing on getting Georgia Pacific, Department of Environmental Protection, to focus on trying to meet water quality in Rice Creek. Unfortunately, they have not been successful in doing that. The Riverkeeper, fortunately, was successful in pulling back the permit. They were ready to issue, DEP was ready to issue the permit back last year, a year ago. And so good news is the permit was slowed down, and everyone's taking a second look. Bad news is because the pipeline's under construction. They have to have it in use by October of this year. And so what we've been looking at is really what's important, and that's what's in the pipe, looking at that discharge and seeing if we can use all of this community's concern, support, the outrage that's been expressed not only to Georgia Pacific but to the Department of Environmental Protection to get additional safeguards in that permit. And we're cautiously optimistic that we're going to see some of that when we see the draft permit, probably in a couple of weeks.
Well, and I know we've been, as you mentioned, we've been kind of focused on the pipeline itself for so long. And I think that obviously people expect that we're going to try to stop this thing, and we have. And I think it's been disappointing to all of us that we really would have liked to have seen improvements at the plant where they actually can meet water quality standards, stay in Rice Creek, not have to build the pipeline. One of the concerns with the pipeline is that they put it out in the middle of the river. There's a big mixing zone, and it's going to be more difficult for us to tell what's coming out. But what we, as you mentioned, and I feel confident about that, we are diligently working towards some potential solutions that can help reduce the amount of pollutants that are going in the river.
Right.
That would not have been there before, back a year ago, as you mentioned, when the permit was issued. But also, we're going to focus on the monitoring. We're going to make sure that what's coming out is what they say is coming out of that pipeline, and that we're not having any additional problems. So we're also working for additional monitoring measures to make sure that this is safe and that we're not threatening the health of the river. As you mentioned also, we've looked at this and tried to stop the pipeline from a legal standpoint. We haven't been able to find those tools to be able to do that. We just haven't had the leverage that we needed legally to make it happen. But I feel good about the fact that at least we've got some things on the table that Georgia Pacific and DEP are willing to discuss now that they weren't willing to discuss a year ago.
Exactly.
And so we've made progress in that respect.
Exactly. And one of our major concerns have been dioxin, and that's what we've been pushing. We need to see aggressive remediation plan for the dioxin that's in the old solids from the decades of production there. And we are confident in there. We have conceptual conversations about a very aggressive remediation plan to get those solids, that contamination, out of the system. And if that we will consider that a success if that happens. But as you mentioned, we have to have very aggressive monitoring. We don't have the legal footing right now to do anything, but if there's some monitoring, if we focus on the monitoring piece of it, if there's any slips, any problems there, then that's something that gives us leverage in the future to continue to make sure we get the cleanest effluent in that pipe.
Right, and that's what we do, is we're going to hold them accountable.
Exactly.
Now, we'll show some of those pictures. I want to put those up on the screen so people can get a sense. This is one of the holding ponds that we're talking about. So will you tell a little bit about this, what we're looking at, so people understand how this process works and what we're talking about when we're talking about legacy solids in the ponds? Sure.
Well, the effluent goes, once it leaves the plant, it actually goes through a series of settling ponds. There's 900 acres of pond system. And it actually pulls out some of the nutrients that are in the effluent, as well as every year it's pulled out all the solids that contain the contamination with the dioxin. What we're looking at right there is Pond 1. Pond 1 is the largest settling pond of the system. It's about 500 acres, and we feel, our scientists have really spent time looking into what's going on in this pond system, thinks 95% of the dioxin problem is in Pond 1. And so we've asked for this to be the focus and look on isolating a footprint of this pond and dredging what's still in the system to make sure we separate the new affluent from this old solids that had the contamination back before any improvements were made to the plant.
Well, and that's the thing, is that people may not realize, is that there's these solids, they call them legacy solids, that build up in the pond, and those are where we think a lot of the contaminants are.
Exactly.
And as this water continues to move through those systems with those solids in place, it does stir up some of those sediments and those contaminants.
Exactly.
And can make their way out into the river, and that's what we're trying to eliminate. And I think that seeing that is pretty dramatic if you've seen it from the air, and you've actually seen it from the ground, and how big that system is, and all of those pollutants that have been going into that system since, like you said, 1947. It's a long time. And of course, back in the day, we didn't really have the environmental protection we have today or requirements. So there was some really nasty stuff that's ended up in those ponds over the year. If we can get this addressed, we feel like we have scored a major victory.
Exactly.
But if we don't get what we want, if that permit is issued and we're not happy with the plan, we're not happy with what's in the permit, what's Riverkeeper going to do then?
Well, that's going to be a problem, because that's something we have been promised by the Department of Environmental Protection, Secretary Vineyard, that we're going to get this. This needs to be done. Georgia Pacific is talking about conceptually, again, that this is something that's on the table. So if it comes back and it's not aggressive enough, if something has changed, and when we see the written permit, it's not in there in detail, that's a game changer, and that's something we will have to address. And that's something we'll kind of keep our cards close to us on how we're going to handle that at this point, but there will be a very strong conversation on what we need to do about that.
Well, and I would say that while we're not going to give away our strategies yet, right. I would say that the public can be assured that we'll continue to fight
most
this.
Definitely,
if
most definitely.
we have the current permit that has draft permit that exactly. is in play now. If we don't see the things that we want in that permit added to the final permit that's issued, then we're going to keep fighting this, because it's an important issue. It's important to the future of the river, and we're not going to be satisfied until the pollution problems are resolved.
Exactly.
And so this is an issue that, you know, we hate to keep saying this, but we're saying we'll know something soon. And I know you've probably heard that many times. We're anxiously waiting. We're anxious to see where this is going to end up, but we're going to keep you posted. And
sure.
You can check our website. That's a good place to get updates. We have a blog on the website that you can check. We also have a Facebook page. I'd encourage you can access that through our website as well. We always put regular updates on a daily
right.
basis on Facebook, so that's a good way to follow us as well.
And just, you know, want to let everyone out there know we have our technical team and our legal team, you know, on standby. As soon as we get this draft permit, we're going to scour through it and make sure everything we've talked about conceptually is in detail in the permit, because not only do we want to see the scope, the plan, and how this is going to be addressed, we want to make sure it's detailed enough in the permit so it has teeth, so we make sure that this happens and it's a reality.
Right, exactly. And a lot of this, you know, that's what our job is to make sure that we hold them accountable. And I think what we're hearing from the other side is that they do recognize the need to address some of these problems that we've been bringing up for over a year now, actually longer than that,
right.
Much longer than that. And I think finally we've got some acknowledgement that some of these problems do need to be addressed and will be addressed, and we'll just have to wait and see. In the next several weeks, we're thinking we actually might see a draft permit to let us know if we have been successful. So
exactly.
Stay tuned, check the website, and we'll know. We're all kind of waiting anxiously to find out if we've been successful in this or not. The other issues we've got, you know, Lisa came in as the new Riverkeeper beginning of February of this year. Been no shortages of issues to work on or threats to the St. John's River. One of the things that you also are kind of inheriting from the previous Riverkeeper is the work that we've done for years on the water withdrawal issue. And I know you attended a technical meeting about a new water supply impact study that was done to look at what the potential impacts would be to removing millions of gallons of water a day. Why don't you give us a little update on that?
I'd be happy to. You know, there's quite an appetite in Central Florida to pull alternative water supply sources, and one of those alternative water supply sources is from the St. John's River, pulling surface water off the St. John's River. It really heated up the controversy in 2008 with Seminole County wanting to withdraw water. They did get a small permit to withdraw 5 million gallons of water a day. They're in that process, but one win that the Riverkeeper had back in 2008 was that the Water Management District looked at what we thought was going to be a comprehensive study at the impacts of these water withdrawals. Unfortunately, it wasn't as comprehensive as it should have been, but there was a study released. It looked at the impacts of the levels of the water supply, of the flow of the river. There was a peer review, which we applaud the district for having a peer review, but done by the National Academies of Sciences, but there were some limitations, and that peer review highlighted those limitations, and we agree that those limitations need to be addressed before any water is withdrawn from the river. One of those limitations is water quality was not a component of the discussion, and based on the models that the district is proposing, the different sources of water that will have an impact on water flows that will replace the fresh water pulled out will have a severe water quality impact, and that has to be addressed because that's what we're fighting every day for, and that's what the district is focusing on as well. But two of the sources they're looking at for replacing the fresh water drawn out is looking at sea level rise, looking at more salt water coming into the St. John's, as well as looking at stormwater runoff as a result of development. And again, both of those have severe water quality impacts, so that must be addressed. Also didn't look at our largest tributary, the Ocklawaha River. It contributes over a third of the freshwater flow into the St. John's. And the impact of the water withdrawals to the Ocklawaha River was not looked at. And so that's a big part of this equation, not only to the water flow and the water supply, but also the water quantity. And so we need to address those issues before any permit for additional withdrawals is approved. The district is focusing on having the applicant make up for the science that's lacking in the study, but with this economy, we just have to make sure that we're paying attention and making sure that information, that science is complete before any decisions are made.
Well, and as you mentioned earlier, back in 2008, 2009, St. John's Riverkeeper did challenge a application by the Seminole County to establish a water withdrawal facility on the St. John's, withdraw, as you mentioned, up to 5.5 million gallons of water a day. And we didn't win. In other words, the permit was approved, but we were successful and able, I think, in slowing down this, which was really a charge to the St. John's River, to everybody wanting to get a straw in it and take water out at that time. Matter of fact, at that time, there was talk about taking a total of about 260 million gallons of water a day out of the St. John's River system, about 155 from the St. John's, and about over 100 million gallons of water a day from the Ocklawaha. We were able to slow that down, get the district, we thought, focused more on water conservation, and unfortunately it seemed like that whole effort to conserve water has evaporated to a certain extent, and the focus may be back on water withdrawals again soon. So we have to be diligent about staying on top of this and making sure that we do put our energy into conserving our existing water resources more efficiently, using them more efficiently, and conserving water resources, and reusing wastewater for irrigation and things like that before we start thinking about taking water out of the river. I think that's been one of the emphasis or the priorities of St. John's Riverkeeper over the years, is really to emphasize conservation and efficiency first. We think it's the most cost effective, but it's also
definitely
poses the least amount of risks to the river.
Exactly. And if you start looking at, communities, and if they worry about the cost of water, water conservation is where it's at. It's the most efficient. We all get to play our part. We all get to play a role, and it's important for us to step up to the plate and start demanding our folks out there, and our leaders and our elected officials, they focus on that as an alternative water source.
Right. And I think the thing that a lot of people I've heard over the years that have maybe been for water withdrawals, they've said as well, it's a small amount of water when you look at the total volume of water that's flowing down the St. John's and ultimately out into the ocean. But we have to remind folks that the St. John's is one of the, quote, laziest rivers in the world. It only drops about 27 feet from its headwaters to its mouth. So in other words, over 310 miles from just west of Vero Beach to the Atlantic Ocean, drops about an inch a mile. And in some places it's relatively flat, or literally flat, and there's not much flow at all. And then you have the impacts of the tides coming in that push against it, and it actually cause a reverse flow a couple times a day in the estuarine part of the river. You end up with a river where pollutants stay in the river for a long period of time. It does not flush very efficiently. So when we remove water from its flow, it makes it that much more difficult for the St. John's River to flush itself, to cleanse itself. And another thing, as we saw on the two-day boat trip, was from just natural occurrences like drought. The water levels were extremely low in Central Florida. Well,
and right now we're having a salinity issue here in the lower basin, because when you have extreme drought, more salt water comes in, and so it messes with the chemistry. It has an impact on wildlife and fish life and plant life that feeds the fish. So it's something we have to look at. It's a very dynamic equation and a system, and you start looking at the stress on the aquifer, it's stress when we have extreme droughts, which we're in right now. I heard Dr. Quint White from JU just mentioned in a speech last night night that we haven't had sufficient rainfall since 2006 in this area. So we are having multiple years of drought, and that has a huge impact that has a place in the equation when you start talking about water withdrawals.
Right, and I think that's the thing that we're trying to press upon people, is that we have to also look at this comprehensively.
Exactly.
And understand the interconnectedness of groundwater and our surface waters. And what we're seeing is, because we're taking too much water out of the ground, and because of lack of rainfall, and there's not natural recharge into the aquifer, we're seeing the flow in a lot of springs and spring-fed rivers is significantly declined. And then the St. Johns, many folks don't realize 20–30% of the freshwater flow of the St. Johns is from springs. So when we reduce groundwater and we reduce the flow of those springs, we're also impacting the health of the St. Johns. Then we take water out of the system. That's less water that is heading out to the mouth. And then when we dredge and go deeper, we're causing more salt water to push farther up into the St. John. So we're really altering the hydrology of the system significantly, as you mentioned.
Exactly.
And impacting habitat and wildlife at the same time. So we have to be very mindful that what we're doing, both to the groundwater, to surface water, and also to the bottoms of the river by dredging.
Exactly.
It all has an impact. We have to look at this comprehensively. Anything else you want to add about this?
And that's just been the most interesting thing. A lot of times we look at these different challenges and threats to the river in a silo, and we're not looking at it comprehensively. And that's something I've learned with the 3 months I've been on the job, that you have to look at every piece of the equation and understand how, just as some simple thing as how we water our yards, how that impacts the whole system, that we all have a role to play. It's not just the big guys out there, it's all of us, and making sure we play our part in protecting the St. Johns.
Right, that's a good point, because I think we can point fingers
easily.
It's easy to identify an enemy in this situation, but I think we all have to take our own personal responsibility, because we're all contributing. That's one of the things Dr. White, mentioning Dr. White again, he likes to say that the problems affecting the river, death by 1,000 cuts. We have so many people living now in the watershed that cumulatively all of our impacts add up to cause significant problems that are really challenging to overcome for the river. It's going to take all of us taking personal responsibility to address those. One of the things that's related to all of this is another issue that I want to talk about. Is there's an issue where there's a proposed permit that could potentially impact Silver Springs. And unfortunately, Silver Springs is already impaired, meaning it's already has some serious pollution problems and impacts that have affected its flow. Why don't you tell a little bit about what this issue is all about?
Most definitely. There is an application at the St. Johns River Water Management District for a cattle ranch. It's a billionaire farmer coming down from Canada, and he's wanting to build his dream cattle ranch in the spring shed of Silver Springs. Silver Springs seems a far way away. It's over near Ocala. However, feeds into the Silver River, it feeds into the Ocklawaha River, which is the largest tributary to the St. Johns River. So the health of Silver Springs is critical to the health of the St. Johns. And already the Silver Springs is experiencing a drastic reduction in flow. It's at 50% of what it was just 30 years ago, and it severely spiked. That reduction spiked in early 2000. So you're looking at some very dramatic reductions already in the flow. And when you're looking at withdrawing, the applicant is asked to withdraw 13.6 million gallons of water a day to irrigate the pasture for this cattle farm. That's more than the city of Ocala uses per day. So it's quite dramatic. It's like putting a brand new city of Ocala in that impact in the Silver Spring shed. But in addition to that, you're going to have a lot of nutrient issues. You're going to have nutrient pollution with the fertilizing of the grass, as well as just the natural waste from the cattle. They're looking at the 30,000 head of cattle. And so it's quite alarming, especially when you look at the problem Silver Springs is already having, the potential negative impact that this application, this permit would have on Silver Springs and ultimately the St. Johns River.
Yeah, and we've been in discussions with Dr. Bob Knight, who's the director of the Florida Springs Institute. And Bob's one of the foremost experts on our springs and done a lot of research. He actually led the 50-year retrospective study of Silver Springs, and is also helping form the Silver Springs Alliance. And they, as you mentioned, they found flow down 50%. I think nitrate levels are up 176%. Fish biomass has decreased by like 92%. It's dramatic, the impacts that have happened to Silver Springs. But I think Silver Springs is such an iconic spring. It's something that is so historic and has had such a big impact on Florida. Tourists around the world know about Silver Springs, but I think it's emblematic. It's really a poster child, Silver Springs, for what's happening to a lot of our springs throughout Florida. This is not isolated to Silver Springs. This is a problem that's affecting a lot of our springs throughout the state. And as I mentioned, the springs are a critical source of fresh water, clean fresh water to the St. Johns River system. This one is a first magnitude spring, Silver Springs, and is a critical spring for, as you mentioned, the Silver River, which is a Florida outstanding water, and the Ocklawaha, which is, I just learned actually yesterday, I didn't realize it's an aquatic preserve. And then those are obviously flow into the Ocklawaha into the St. Johns. This is a critical issue, and we're on top of it. We're asking actually right now for people to get engaged on this to try to stop the permit, because we feel like this will have a dramatic impact, further impact on the flow of the river, taking that much out of the aquifer, which feeds the Silver Springs. But also, as you mentioned, the runoff. What can people do if they're concerned about this or want to learn more about it?
Well, most definitely. We have actually launched a Springs website, ilovesprings.org. And so people can go to that website and actually write a letter to the Water Management District, write a letter to your elected officials, let them know that this is bad for Silver Springs, it's bad for our river, and it's bad for our environment. It's something I think is a poster child for how our regulations have turned their back on the health of Florida's environment. And so I think it's critical people get engaged, learn about it, and you can visit our website to better understand how to make your voice heard. And of course, we're going to be a voice for the St. Johns and make sure that we get engaged in the issue on every level. Also working with our friends in Ocala and the Silver Springs Alliance to have a Springs Forum in May, so they can visit our website. We'll have more details on the Springs Forum, because there's many threats to our springs. There's a lot of things going on in the Swanee River District that we need to discuss, because I think it's an example of the threat and illustrates the threat that our aquifer is under and some of the challenges there that ultimately impact this entire system that we talked about earlier. Is very delicate, and all of these pieces work together.
Exactly. Well, and as you mentioned, that we can learn at ilovesprings.com, .org, excuse me. It's pretty easy. So just go to ilovesprings.org, or you can actually go to the St. Johns Riverkeeper website, and there's a link there that'll take you to a page. We have a blog entry about this issue to learn about it, and it'll also take you over to ilovesprings.org, and you can also join there's a Facebook page for that too, to follow information, not just about Silver Springs, but the threats to all of our springs. We really are hoping to create more awareness throughout the entire state for the fate of our springs and what we're doing to them, and hopefully we can get people to rally around our springs, we can restore them, which will also help our other waterways as well. I was talking to Jim Draper the other day, and we were talking about how really our springs are like our window into our aquifer.
Exactly.
So they're indicative, the health of the spring is indicative of the health of our groundwater. And we obviously want to protect our groundwater just as we do our surface water. So I would encourage everybody to get involved with this issue. It is critical. It is something that we need your support for. There's a lot of other information on the website about this issue and others as well. Well, we're actually wrapping up. Anything else you want to say as we sign off another episode of the St. Johns Riverkeeper Show?
Well, it's just great to be here. I've enjoyed meeting all of our members out in the community, the supporters of the St. Johns River, and I'm just happy to be your Riverkeeper and look forward to continuing working to fight for the St. Johns River.
Well, and I encourage everybody out there to get involved. That's one thing I always tell folks. Get involved, whether it's joining St. Johns Riverkeeper or just being involved in these decisions. It's critical. We, the citizens, it's our river, our resources. We need to protect them. So please get involved, learn more, and we'll see you next month on another edition of the St. Johns Riverkeeper Show. Thanks for joining us. We're a nonprofit advocacy group for the St. Johns River.
And our mission is to help protect the river.